I stood in the corner of the most expensive wedding venue in the city, wearing a simple dress from a thrift store. The bride looked at me with disgust and said the words that would change everything. "Who let this beggar into my wedding?" She had no idea who I really was. Before we dive into this incredible story of hidden identity and sweet justice, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Now, let me tell you about the day that changed everything. My name is Milan, and 3 weeks ago I received an invitation that I almost threw away. It was cream-colored cardstock with gold lettering, the kind that screams expensive from the moment you touch it. Rachel Morrison cordially invited me to witness her union with Jonathan Palmer at the Grand Meridian Hotel. I stared at that invitation for a long time, remembering a girl I knew in college who used to eat ramen noodles for dinner and borrow textbooks because she couldn't afford her own. Rachel and I weren't close friends back then. We were more like friendly acquaintances who happened to share a few classes and occasionally studied together at the library. She was sweet enough, always worried about money, always talking about how she'd marry someone rich someday, so she'd never have to stress about bills again. I remember thinking it was a joke, the way college kids joke about unrealistic dreams, but apparently, she wasn't joking. I hadn't spoken to Rachel in over 8 years. Our lives went in completely different directions after graduation. She moved to the city and I made some choices that changed everything, but I'll get to that later. The point is, I was surprised to get this invitation. Surprised enough that I almost didn't go. What would we even talk about? What did we have in common anymore? But something in me felt like I should attend. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the part of me that remembered the girl who used to worry about every penny. So I RSVP'd yes, not knowing that this decision would lead to one of the most humiliating and ultimately satisfying days of my life. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of my small closet trying to decide what to wear. My wardrobe isn't exactly extensive. I live simply now by choice, and most of my clothes come from thrift stores or discount retailers. I pulled out a soft gray dress that I'd bought for $15 at a secondhand shop. It was clean, modest, and perfectly appropriate for a wedding. Or so I thought. As I got ready, I caught myself remembering things I'd tried to forget. The designer clothes that used to fill a walk-in closet, the jewelry that cost more than most people's cars, the life I'd walked away from because I realized that all those expensive things were just covering up an emptiness inside. I'd chosen to live differently, to find out who I really was when I wasn't defined by my bank account or my family's reputation. I slipped on the gray dress and looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was different from the one who used to attend charity galas and society events. This woman had calluses on her hands from volunteering at the local shelter. This woman knew the names of her neighbors and actually cared about their lives. This woman had learned that real wealth isn't about what you own, but about who you are when nobody's watching. The Grand Meridian Hotel took my breath away when I arrived. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings that seemed to stretch up forever. Marble floors reflected the light in ways that made everything look like it was sparkling. Fresh flowers arranged in displays that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent filled every corner. I'd forgotten how extravagant this world could be. I felt immediately out of place. The other guests were dressed in designer gowns and expensive suits. The women wore jewelry that caught the light with every movement, and the men had that polished look that comes from a lifetime of privilege. I smoothed down my simple dress and found a quiet corner where I could observe without drawing attention to myself. That's when I saw her. Rachel glided into the ballroom wearing a dress that probably cost more than a car. Her hair was styled in an elaborate updo with what looked like real diamonds woven through it. She moved with a confidence I'd never seen in her before, surrounded by people who hung on her every word. This wasn't the same girl who used to count quarters to buy coffee in the student union. I watched her for a while, fascinated by the transformation. She'd gotten everything she'd dreamed about in college: the rich husband, the expensive lifestyle, the social circle that opened doors to places most people would never see. Part of me was genuinely happy for her. She'd worked hard to get where she was, and if this was what made her happy, then good for her. But as I continued watching, I started to notice something else. The way she spoke to the service staff, dismissive and cold. The way she looked at guests she deemed beneath her new status. The way she seemed to have forgotten where she came from. This wasn't just success changing someone. This was something deeper. I decided to approach her during a quiet moment when her crowd of admirers had dispersed to get drinks. I walked over with a genuine smile, ready to congratulate an old friend on her big day, but the moment our eyes met, I saw something that made my stomach sink. She looked at me like I was a stain on her perfect day. "Milan?" she said, her voice filled with confusion and something that might have been horror. "What are you doing here?" I felt the warmth drain from my face, but I kept my smile in place. "I got your invitation. I wanted to congratulate you on your wedding. You look beautiful, Rachel." She glanced around nervously, as if checking to see who might be watching our conversation. I didn't expect you to actually come. I mean, I sent invitations to everyone from our graduation list, but..." Her voice trailed off, but I understood. She'd sent me an invitation out of obligation, never expecting that someone like me would actually show up to her high society wedding. Before I could respond, a group of women approached us. They were all perfectly styled, wearing clothes that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. Their smiles were polished and their eyes were sharp, taking in every detail of my appearance. "Rachel, darling," one of them said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Who's your friend?" I could see Rachel's internal struggle. She was embarrassed by me, embarrassed by the reminder of her past, but she couldn't be openly rude with everyone watching. "This is Milan. We went to college together." The women looked me up and down, their expressions making it clear that they found me lacking. One of them, a blonde woman with cold blue eyes, actually wrinkled her nose as if I smelled bad. "How nice," she said, though her tone suggested it was anything but. "And what do you do now, Milan?" I could have told them the truth. I could have mentioned the chain of hotels I owned, the business empire I'd built, the charitable foundation that had helped thousands of people. Instead, I said simply, "I work with people who need help." They exchanged glances, and I saw the judgment in their eyes. To them, I was exactly what I appeared to be, a poor woman who'd somehow stumbled into their exclusive world. "How wonderful," the blonde woman said with a patronizing smile. "It's so important to give back to society. Of course, some of us contribute in different ways." The conversation continued like this for several minutes, each comment designed to make me feel small and out of place. Rachel said nothing to defend me. In fact, she seemed to shrink further into herself with each passing moment, as if my presence was contaminating her perfect day. Finally, the group moved away, leaving Rachel and me alone again. I expected her to apologize, to explain that she felt pressured by her new friends. Instead, she turned to me with a hardness in her eyes that I'd never seen before. "Milan, I think maybe you should leave," she said quietly. "This isn't really your kind of event." I felt like I'd been slapped. My kind of event? You know what I mean. Look around. Look at yourself. You don't belong here. Her voice was getting louder, and other guests were starting to notice. "I've worked so hard to build this life, and I can't have reminders of who I used to be." The hurt in my chest was real and sharp. This was someone I'd once considered a friend, someone I'd helped study for exams, someone who'd cried on my shoulder when she was stressed about money. And now she was looking at me like I was something to be scraped off her shoe. "Rachel, I just came to congratulate you. I'm not here to cause problems." "But you are causing problems," she hissed. "Just by being here. People are asking questions. They're wondering why I know someone like you." The words hung in the air between us like poison. Someone like me. As if being poor, or appearing to be poor, made me less than human. That's when her voice rose to a level that caused conversations around us to stop. "Who let this beggar into my wedding?" The words echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. Every guest within hearing distance turned to stare at us. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks as dozens of eyes focused on me, judging, dismissing, looking at me exactly the way Rachel wanted them to. "I want you to leave," she continued, her voice carrying across the room. "Now, before you embarrass me any further." I stood there for a moment, absorbing the cruelty of it all. The woman who used to worry about buying coffee was now calling me a beggar at her wedding. The woman who used to be grateful for every small kindness was now treating me like garbage to be disposed of. But something interesting happened in that moment of humiliation. Instead of feeling small, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I remembered who I was. Not the simple woman in the thrift store dress, but the woman who had built something meaningful with her life. The woman who had chosen substance over appearance, character over status. I looked at Rachel, really looked at her, and I saw something I'd missed before. Beneath all the designer clothes and expensive jewelry, beneath the perfect hair and flawless makeup, she was still the same insecure girl who'd been terrified of being poor. She was so afraid of going back to where she came from that she'd become someone unrecognizable. "You know what, Rachel?" I said quietly, my voice carrying despite its softness. "You're right. I don't belong here." She looked momentarily relieved, thinking I was about to leave quietly. "I don't belong here as a guest," I continued, "but I do belong here as the owner." The confusion on her face was almost comical. "What are you talking about?" "I own this hotel, Rachel. I own the entire Grand Meridian chain." The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The whole room seemed frozen in disbelief. Rachel's face went through several emotions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked like panic. "That's impossible. You're lying." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Within seconds, I'd called a number I knew by heart. "Hello, Marcus? This is Milan. I'm at the Grand Meridian downtown. Could you please come to the ballroom?" "Yes, now. Thank you." I hung up and looked at Rachel, who was staring at me as if I'd grown a second head. That was Marcus Henderson, the hotel manager. He'll be here in a moment to confirm what I just told you. The guests around us had formed a loose circle, straining to hear every word. The blonde woman who'd been so dismissive earlier looked like she might faint. Rachel's new husband appeared at her side, his face a mask of confusion and growing concern. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between Rachel and me. "Your wife just called me a beggar and demanded that I leave my own hotel," I said simply. Within minutes, Marcus arrived. He was a tall, distinguished man in his 50s who'd been managing the Grand Meridian for over a decade. The moment he saw me, his face lit up with genuine warmth. "Milan, what a wonderful surprise. I didn't know you were attending an event here today. Is everything all right?" I smiled at him, feeling the weight of the moment. "Everything's fine, Marcus. I just needed to clarify something for the wedding party. Could you please tell everyone who I am?" Marcus looked confused but nodded. "Of course. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Milan Chen, the owner of the Grand Meridian hotel chain. She's been running the company for the past 5 years and has expanded it to include over 50 properties worldwide." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as the information sank in, as the guests realized that the woman they'd been looking down on was actually the person paying for their extravagant evening. Rachel's face had gone completely white.